Sancho to score. No mistakes this time.
That is a rocket.
Royce and another fantastic goal by Marco Royce. Haaland's volley is beautiful beyond compare.
Das Wunder von Dortmund, Foulspiel von hinten an Götze.
Needs to lay it off, we're going to shot away. Oh, what a goal!
Welcome back to Dortmund Dispatch. Today I am joined by two legendary Borussia Dortmund writers. It's Joey and Pedro, whose work I'm sure you're all familiar with. But how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing good. Can't complain. Just excited to be back to talk about Borussia Dortmund. We got a full weekend full of interesting matches ahead of us, and yeah, just excited to be back in the episode.
I'm pretty happy to be back too. Wish it wasn't getting dark out quite so early, but we have another Borussia Dortmund win to talk about, so that's always a positive in my book.
Well, there are positives from this week, right? Were there positives from this game? Do you want to talk about them, Joey? Are they in the room with us?
I will talk about the positives of this weekend. Number one is plus 3 points. That is what matters. We got the result. It wasn't pretty. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but it is still a result. So I'm sure we're going to go into a bit of the criticism here, but as long as we're starting on the positives, again, we got the win and we're still in the top four. I think third place right now, a couple points behind Leipzig, probably 25 points behind Bayern, but who's counting? What do you guys think?
I mean, there's another positive I think we can take away from this match. Pedro, I'll give you first dibs at it, but
No, that's okay. I'm sure Eli has like good positives about this match. I don't have many, to be honest. Like besides what Joey already said, I think 3 points is always a good thing in my books. But at the same time, man, I go back to the core of football of being a source of entertainment, and watching that match was anything but entertainment to me on a Friday afternoon here in Brazil. Just watching that match, I almost fell asleep multiple times. It was really hard to keep myself awake, but for the sake of my Borussia Dortmund fandom and also this podcast, I just kept grinding to this match, and yeah, in my opinion, was one of our worst or most disappointing performances in the season so far. Of course, the 3 points are always good, but it's always good to put in context and in perspective of how that win happened. I mean, I have some stats here in front of me: 0.32 xG generated in this match against Augsburg. Shots on target one big chance created, and we all know how that chance materialized with the bouncing pinball with the two Augsburg center backs just giving the ball clean to Serhou Guirassy to score. They just basically we don't want to win this game. Just please score and then take the win to the Signal Iduna Park. See you some other time in the season, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean overall, like I think we're gonna talk more about the tactical aspects of it as well. But I'll also let Eli talk about his positive. But yeah, overall, very disappointing performance, not entertaining at all. But yeah, I think that's what Joey said. I mean, the 3 points are good. Like I'm sufficed with the 3 points, but as Borussia Dortmund fans and like just football fans in general, we always want to see more. So yeah, just a little bit disappointing, but I'll take the 3 points.
yeah, I have two positives. One's serious, and I think it's actually like a big deal, and the second one is that it was a Friday match, and I work on Fridays, so I didn't have to watch the first half of this match. I don't even know if I had to watch. I think I got home because of the time difference in time to watch most of the second half. But yeah, I got to miss a lot of this terrible, no good match, and they got a terrible, no good match out of the way while I was at work. But the real positive is not that I missed a Borussia Dortmund minute of football, because that's never that positive. But it's that if you look at three guys on the bench, Daniel Svensson, Julian Ryerson, Karim Adeyemi, all on the bench. Svensson, I think, played every minute of like the first 7 games of the season, 7 or 8 games in the league. He'd played every minute in the Champions League as well, I believe. So to get him some rest, Julian Ryerson's like our leading creator and expected assisted goals per 90. Kareem Adeyemi is probably like our most important player in terms of like creating space on the pitch. He just opens up everything, and he's the only guy that we allow to run behind because for whatever reason, the last two coaches of Borussia Dortmund, Nico Kovac included, have not really let Maxi Bayer do a ton of that. So to me, Kareem Adeyemi is like the most important player in our attack. He's on the bench. And I think that definitely created some issues. But Pedro, can you tell me a little bit more about some of the reasons Borussia Dortmund's attack was so terrible in this match?
I think it also speaks tons of our depth. Not speaking about the attack mainly. I think our main problem was the midfield. I think we lacked a lot of intensity and just ball carrying and ball progression with the options we had. With Sabitzer in the back, the midfield, but especially the our pieces a little bit more up front with Pascal Gross and Chukwuemeka. Of course, Gross at times he would just come back a little further back in the pitch to be in the double pivot. But at the same time, like those transitions between Sabitzer going forward and transitioning with Gross didn't work that well in terms of intensity and just occupying space in the final third, in my opinion. And I think the overall dynamic was pretty poor. I really thought also Augsburg had a really decent job in pressing us and at the same time defending in the middle block. I think they really closed the central areas for us. And also the profiles that we had in the flanks didn't help much. Of course, we had Jan Koto, which is his profile to go forward, but he was a little bit too isolated, and we all know he hasn't combined well with Gross or Sabitzer in this season so far. So he was a little bit too isolated. Didn't have many options to combine, and at the same time, we had Bayer on the other side, who was more of a hybrid, like left winger, or at the same time, he was also playing as a left wing back, but it's not really his role. I think the further away he is from the goal line or to the final third, just striking the pitch, I don't think that's his deal. And putting him in that position just really minimize his contribution offensively for to this team. And it was more of a tactical role, just coming back to defend on a back five. Bayer was really good at that, and as he was really disciplined. But I really think he was in a position to succeed offensively, and we really needed that. And so I thought our pieces forward could not carry the ball enough, could not progress the ball in the midfield. We lacked intensity a little bit, and our pieces on the flank were too isolated to do anything. So I think that really didn't help our setup. And of course, I think that also reflects the way we scored completely by chance, created by Augsburg own defensive line. But yeah, I think overall those are my main tactical points of why we didn't create as much, and it also, for to me, speaks tons on our lack of good depth in the squad overall. Of course, as Eli said, I think it's really good that we rested some guys who really needed the rest, and we still got a win. I love it. I think that also it's really good for the planning of the season ahead, especially when you're coming with a very difficult schedule in the next few weeks. But yeah, it really speaks tons of our lack of depth.
I don't know why we're talking about like depth because the three guys you're calling out in Gross, Sabitzer, and Mecha, two of those guys are in our first 11. Like I believe Sabitzer and Mecha have started all three of the Champions League games. So like that is supposed to be your first choice midfield. One thing I would say is when you add Gross into the mix there, it gets very, very slow, like you talked about.
Yeah, I think
And
it's more of
there's
the combination of them all together on the pitch. But
yeah,
I still think we like that. But yeah, I think that's what you said. The combination of these guys together on the pitch doesn't work that well for me.
yeah. My issue in particular is like where like who do you want passing the ball forward? Who do you want passing the ball in the final third? And to me, if you look at some of the passing statistics from this match, like I'd say Gross for both of those questions. Like I want him playing the final ball, but I also want him playing the ball into the final third. And I think the biggest issue we kind of had is Ansel Mito comes in for Schlotterbeck. So another great like opportunity to rest a player. Obviously like not entirely fit, but this is a guy who's returning from injury and was apparently very, very sick this weekend. So he misses out. You get a guy who's still 20 years old. He looks very athletic, very aggressive, but not necessarily the most composed passer of the game. And like we're also comparing him to a guy who's one of the best in the world in Schlotterbeck. And we've talked all season about how the back line has to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the build-up play because your midfield pair can't really do it in Sabitzer and Nemecha. And Nemecha did have 4 completed take-ons, but in terms of ball carrying and progressive distance carried, it wasn't as good as you would expect from a guy that's capable of completing all 4 of his attempted take-ons. And then you have Pascal Gross leading the team in terms of passes into the penalty area and progressive passes, and also had he was the only player with multiple key passes. But if you compare him to kind of the other 2 guys in the midfield, there's just no other passing. And so while Gross has an incredible amount of progressive passes, he has like decent amounts of all the other types of important passes. And he's just not able to kind of run around the pitch at 34, excuse me, and do all your midfield passing. Especially when you're playing a 3-man midfield and then you have a midfielder playing at right wing. Like, these guys need to be doing something to help out Gross, and maybe some of that is the running, like I talked before, and you just talked about Maxi Bayer playing like left wing back. Essentially, like, who is running around on the pitch? Because Carney Chukwuemeka is a midfielder playing right wing. He's not running in behind. He's not stretching anyone. He's not putting pressure on the defense. And then you have Julian Brandt, who's done some great runs, made some great runs this year, but all off the bench. And from the start of the match, I felt like his runs weren't necessarily the same, or of the same level. The pace isn't necessarily there. This is also, I believe, his 3rd match of the week, and at his age, that's not something he can maybe do as well at 29. So those were the main things I noticed.
So part of the strategy, I think, especially in the second half, with having a player like Gross out there, is that I mean, like it or hate it, I believe Kovac wanted the team to be slowing the ball down, slowing the pace of play down at every opportunity. And we saw that with Kobel really taking his time on several free kicks and eventually, or goal kicks, I mean, eventually getting a yellow card for it. Um, but the creativity moving forward was just not there for much of this game. And I mean, it really was a fine margin with one mistake. Or I mean, it's hard to even call it a mistake that the ball just ricochets, pinballs, but Guirassy capitalizes on it, and that is the fine margin. Now, if this had gone the opposite direction and we went into halftime a goal down, then I do think there had to have been a different kind of tactical shift that we would have seen with somebody like Adeyemi coming on much sooner, or a Danny Svensson coming on to push Maxi Bayer up the pitch. But with getting that early goal, I really think Kovac was trying to see how long the team could kind of hold out like this. If he could, keep a couple of these guys fresher for the midweek match in Manchester City, great. But at the same time, I'm usually of the mindset in this kind of game where the best form of defense can be attack. Watching Dortmund, I am never confident when there's a 1-goal lead. So the idea that Kovac or the squad would be playing for that 1-0 is not really a strategy that I love. I really think we certainly have the capabilities and the players to create a bit more, to have a few more big chances. And when it comes down to what you were talking about earlier, Pedro, with this match not really having that entertainment value, I think that's part of it. There weren't many big chances created. There weren't a lot of close shots on goal or on target for that matter. And Augsburg had several stints of momentum pushing on our goal. I mean, they had the higher XG, so there is a little bit of luck here if we think about it, because I think Augsburg easily could have gotten that equalizer. At the same time, this is Dortmund and Kobel's sixth clean sheet of the campaign, which is also not nothing. So that's impressive because it speaks to how well this defense has held together, even in the face of ugly games, ugly away games like this.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
a lot of the reason Augsburg ended up having more XG in this match is just down to game state because of how conservative Dortmund were in the second half. But because Augsburg are such a poor side, you kind of expect Dortmund to have a lot more at the same time. So I think it's a fair criticism to say that Dortmund should have created a lot more. But I also think that this is like just a kind of fluke outcome almost of like a heavily rotated side and like having the game state and wanting to like rest some of your guys and not like push them, that I think like that's not, it's not an excuse for how bad this was, but it is a reason, if that makes sense.
It's worth considering.
yeah, and Uh, yeah, I don't know. You guys bring some really valid points, and also I just want to correct myself in one thing. I said Sabitzer before, but of course was I wanted to mean Julian Brandt. So every time I said Sabitzer before, it was meaning to be Julian Brandt, who also didn't have the impact they were expecting starting and once every once in a while in this match. But yeah, I just thought the setup didn't really like helped our game, and I really don't like Gross as much in that position, really deeper in the midfield. But yeah, of course, I think the 3 pointers are valid, and against a side like Augsburg, you're always gonna suffer a little bit. Of course, with Dortmund, we suffer a little bit too much at times, but overall, I think we managed to keep very like being safe from conceding overall, but at the same time, I was expecting a little more intensity. Of course, I think we're going to talk about intensity later in the script, but I really thought we could. Of course, we rested the guys, but I was expecting more aura or more willing to fighting for a starting spot from the guys that came in. So, but I did with that kind of performance and the guys that started for us in this particular match. I think it only like highlights how we need the starters to be always fit and hopefully performing to their best, so we have our best shot in every competition that we play.
So Sebastian Kale said of this match, I'm very happy with the 3 points today and we've achieved our goal. We have to put it into perspective. I believe we can play much better football. We didn't create many chances overall, but we are also in a very intense period. We need to offer ourselves more, demand more balls, and make better deep runs and play faster football. But these are things that the manager will analyze with the team. Nevertheless, we are very happy to take the 3 points today because they help us at the top of the table. I think that just about sums it up. Like, there's not too much to analyze here. It's like, yeah, we got 3 points, but we kind of sucked.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
I think so. There is one thing written here, a question that I think Brian might have put into our notes here that I did want to address. And it's the question of, is this performance something that detracts from Kovac's overall impact, or does this speak in his favor as a game that Dortmund perhaps loses in seasons past? And I think that's a really good question because in under both Nuri Sahin and Edin Terzic, this was the kind of match that Dortmund would really struggle with, especially away from home. You see a team that is struggling, is getting hammered by the other teams in the Bundesliga. Those are the matches that Dortmund really struggles with, or has struggled with in years past. And I think that there is something that could be said for the fact that we haven't lost one of those under Kovac this season, and haven't really lost one of those under him in quite a while now. And I really think time will tell how this all plays out, whether this is more of a routine, safe kind of win, or if perhaps it's warnings of maybe some chinks in the armor, so to speak, of the system, or I mean, it could even just be reflective of the fact that there's a lot of load management going on within the squad right now, and trying to keep everybody happy and fit is not the easiest thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but I feel like it has typically been talked about as like the mentality issue of the past, but it wasn't a mentality issue that caused us to lose points. It was the fact that we were consistently shit defensively. And Niko Kovac now has us like much worse attacking, but he has us actually for the first time in like since Klopp playing competent defensive football. He's doing it in a very different way from Klopp, but the attack's not working, and it's consistently not working. You can talk about like the variance, and I think there's like a lower variance in playing defensively solid football. And that means that when we perform poorly, we're more likely to win because of the uh, financial disparity and like the quality that provides us. You can always just have your better players kind of go pile on some pressure for the last 20, 30 minutes of a match, like we did against Koln when you're poor attacking wise. But it also leads to situations like this where you're essentially playing a coin flip game in the second half because you're not able to create chances um, and you have the lead and you're just essentially playing with fire, hoping and flipping the coin that today Augsburg doesn't score. They don't have the finishing touch, but maybe at another point this season, someone will have that finishing touch like St. Pauli did, and because you don't really create chances, even though they did score 3 goals and that from not the best chances, they're able to come back and see themselves into the match. And I think that's the bigger concern for me is like going forward, we need to have a more coherent game plan and a game plan that works.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I think you guys bring really valid points, especially Joey in this particular situation. But
Thanks, Pedro.
um, no, man, I just complimented you so many times at the beginning. Let Joey have some of it. But yeah, where was I? No, I was just gonna just add up to what you guys said. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it also has to do with our necessity to rotate, which I said since the beginning. It's not wrong for Kovac to do that, and it also speaks and alludes to what I said before, that not saying like the quality drops significantly from our starters to our bench options, but there is some degree of disparity between both that really worries me if in case of injuries, in case we need to rotate more, if we drop points in games they're not supposed to drop because our starters are not 100%, that worries me a little bit. And but that's also part of football, and Dortmund should have prepared in advance for this kind of situation. But that's another debate. But at the same time, I agree that I think Dortmund, this game was kind of like one of those that could be a trap for Borussia Dortmund. And even though we did not perform to the standard, and I still think there's some issues with our team in possession, I thought that the resilience of this team and the ability to pull off a victory like that really speaks tons of Kovac's ability to raise our floor. That's always something I always praise him for, and that's great because we're gonna need those points at the end of the campaign to qualify for the Champions League or. Don't know, I'm not talking about title race because we are 7 points behind, but yeah, just glad that we could pull off a win like that in a scenario that our quality would necessarily just drop a little bit in terms of from the starters to the bench options that we currently have. But yeah, just glad with the win. And yeah, I think that's an assessment that we need to keep a track on in the next few weeks for sure.
Yeah, and let's get into the next segment of our show. We're going to have our stars of the week. Joey, I'll let you start us off. Who do you want to talk about positively?
Yeah, so this might be, or this might sound a little unconventional for the star of the week this week, but I'm gonna give it to Maxi Bayer. This is a guy who, I mean, kind of like Julian Rierson, always seems like he's given 100%, but he's also a guy who I think when he's offered an opportunity to start in a match, he takes it. And if that means that he's playing as left wing back, he's going to give it his all as left wing back. And in that role, he won both of his tackles, a 2 out of 2, and he won 4 out of 4 ground duels too. And I remember multiple points in that match where he was tracking back into our own box, and he made a couple really impressive tackles. So Maxi Bayer, I'm going to give the star of the week for his adaptability and versatility, and just his overall presence on the pitch. I do definitely agree with what Pedro said earlier about Maxi playing in this position. It really hindered his ability to make an impact offensively, but he did make a pretty big impact defensively, in my opinion. And I'd also like to just give an honorable mention to Job, because I do think Job played pretty well when he came in, and he had a one tackle inside our box too that, or maybe it was a blocked shot, but it was a really vital touch. So wanted to give Job a little credit too.
Pedro, who's your star of the week?
My star of the week, it's a guy that we've been highlighting in this season so far. I think he has been really solid for us. I think Remy Bensebaini is been really solid, especially when we don't have Nico Schlotterbeck, as Eli said before. I think and we also discussed it in past episodes. I think we lack a lot in ball progression without Nico available for selection. But I think Bensebaini has compensated that a lot. I think he has become a leader of this group, a leader of this team on the pitch as well, and he has shown his quality from what he started in Borussia Dortmund, which we remember correctly, it wasn't his best start as a black and yellow player, but he provided that comeback story that we all love, and just love the fact that he has been a solid foundation of this back line. So for me, I think Remy Bensebaini is going to be my star.
My star of the week, as per usual, will be a cop-out answer. It's Kiel Watson. He's on loan, but he scored his first Bundesliga 2 goal for Bochum, unfortunately for Bochum. But Kiel Watson, he's kind of played all over the pitch for Bochum this year. He's played some 8. In this match, he played as kind of a second striker. And we're talking about a lack of runs that were coming. Like Kiel Watson this season has done the same role as Carney Chukwuemeka. It's what he did in the third tier last year. And this isn't to say he's necessarily even at Carney Chukwuemeka's level yet, although he has one more goal. No, I'm kidding. It's still the second tier. Like, it's not a great level, but Kiel Watson has shown a lot of versatility for a guy who's still not 20 years old, and I look forward to seeing what he can do next year. And let's move on and talk about some negatives, some guys we didn't like this week. Joey, I'll let you go first again. I'm feeling very generous to you, I guess. Who's your dud of the week?
I think so. It must be because Pedro was complimenting me earlier, but my dud this week, somebody we have really not talked about at all so far on the podcast, and if we did, then it was as forgettable as his performance on Friday, and that's Carney Chukwuemeka. I just don't really remember much of anything that he did on the pitch, and that's the main reason. And he comes in as a sub, and I think there's some really, we've seen some really great bits of dribbling from him. As an impact player, he's been decent, but when we see him start, I just feel like he's got to be better. I think Carney struggled to really get into this match, and I think that's why he was subbed too.
Joey,
Just
do you
a
remember
bit disappointing.
The stat I gave on Carney Chukwuemeka in starts versus off the bench in terms of his take-ons that I put in the chat today?
I don't remember exactly, but was it like 0 out of 10 when he starts or something like that?
So, Carney Chukwuemeka in his 2 starts this season is 0 for 5 in terms of his take-on success rate. Off the bench, Carney Chukwuemeka is 10 for 15 of his take-ons. So, Carney Chukwuemeka off the bench is one of the best dribblers on the planet. Carney Chukwuemeka off the start, in this tiny sample size, I will say, is horrific. And right now, that's his issue. because off the bench he's not necessarily great at everything, and like there's a lot of other numbers that I would say are very bad for being off the bench. Um, but in terms of his dribbling ability, his main highlight ability, the reason that you spend a lot of money on him, off the bench, unbelievable. From the start right now, still figuring it out. Just needs to find his moments. I don't know how else to say it. But Pedro, who's your dud of the week?
My dad, yeah, I think we have a few options in a match so dull as we had against Augsburg. But since we didn't have a long week with two matches, and this is just a really a specific scenario where Dortmund needed to spare some starters. But I think the guy who I had most expectations with this match, especially of how important he would be on creating chances, would be Julian Brandt. Especially he hasn't been starting that often, so and but always praise him in the beginning of the season for coming into the match and having an impact. But since the past few matches that I've seen him start, he hasn't impressed me at all, or has not provided the same output I was expecting. So, just in terms of expectations and in terms of what he was delivering as a sub, I think I would say Julian Brandt would be my dull for this match in particularly. I still think he has some decent numbers this season and he is going to contribute. But yeah, starting, I think it's just showing on why Kovac doesn't trust him 100% to be a starting number 10 for Borussia Dortmund. And also, I think it was a interview in the past week where he said he preferred to give the armband to Nico Schlotterbeck because Nico was a certified starter and he was in and out in the team, not starting that much. And it also speaks about a lot about Julian Brandt, of his lack of consistency, unfortunately. And as a starter in this match, it just did not cut for me. So Julian Brandt is my dad.
You're saying he played badly in his last two starts. He literally scored in his last start before this one. I think in this match it's very fair to give him your dud, but a bit harsh. He scored against Frankfurt.
I know, but man, come on. Have you seen that first half? Yeah, he was a non-factor, but still, like you get like it's easy to just to based on like goal stats. But yeah, I mean overall, besides that specific output on that match, man, he did not cut for me. But I'm talking about this match in particularly. So
Yeah, we talked about
Yeah,
Frankfurt in the last episode, so this is
I don't
the
know.
week resets.
And you're
yes, I
saying like,
wasn't
did I
here,
see the
so
first
yeah.
half? Did I see the first half, Pedro? No, because I am employed. Um.
Me too,
Anyway.
but I was recovering from surgery. That's why I watched that match. Otherwise, I wouldn't.
uh, well, I don't get sick leave, so I'm not allowed to have surgeries. Um. Next up, we have a match against. Sorry, Pedro. Dortmund faced Manchester City in the Champions League on Wednesday. Dortmund have only lost one game all season to Bayern Munich. Manchester City have lost three in the Premier League, including against Brighton and Aston Villa, with Monaco holding them to a 2-2 draw in the Champions League. Dortmund may or may not have Nico Schlotterbeck at their disposal for this game. Rain Cherky is fit again, but most importantly, Erling Haaland is definitely fit and firing as he makes his homecoming. What are our thoughts and expectations for this match?
I guess I'll start with that one. With Man City, that's especially away. I think that's a match is going to be really tough for us. I think overall, I think it's a match in which Niko Kovac would do a really nice setup for us to play in transition. And I think also why he spared so many starters for us to face, particularly Pep Guardiola's Man City at the Etihad. But yeah, just curious how we're gonna be out of possession, how we're gonna try to stand against their blitz and their press and counter press as well. Overall, with Ryan Cherky, that's a guy I praised a lot in this podcast, and that's a guy I wanted to see in Borussia Dortmund colors. And that's a guy that has a decent output for Man City, even though his off-ball work is not as great, as he's not that physically gifted as well. He doesn't have that much intensity overall compared to other like key midfielders City had for years, like Kevin De Bruyne and on his peak. But yeah, that's a game that I'm excited to see how would react against a side as qualified as Man City, with some interesting youngsters also coming into the squad and showing quality like O'Reilly. The other Oscar Bob as well has also impressed me this season. Jeremy Doku is a guy I fear a lot, so we're gonna need Ryerson to be the top of his game, because Doku has been had some impact for Man City in the Premier League as well. But yeah, just excited overall for this match to see how we're gonna behave off possession and how we're gonna attempt to hurt them. I think we have some capabilities to do that with Maxi Bayer's movement, with Adeyem's speed and output in the final third. But yeah, I mean, if I could already give my score predictions, if you guys allow me, I think it's gonna be a 2-2 draw and I'll be glad to see that happening, honestly.
That
Joey?
I have to admit, Pedro, that was going to be my score prediction as well. I think
Sorry,
that
bro.
Kovac is probably gonna line up in a way that uh, sort of lends itself to Dortmund absorbing a lot of pressure and trying to strike on the counterattack. I'm like 99% sure Karim Adeyemi will start, and I think he will probably be a key part of Niko Kovac's plan with going forward. I do think there is maybe a big question mark over Nico Schlotterbeck. But the good news with that, at least, is that he has been ill and not injured. So when he's back, he should be fully fit. I think that I read earlier that they're optimistic that he'll be ready for this game, but not quite ready to make the call yet. Um, I do think that Dortmund tends to show up in these cup ties, and I mean, it's hard to imagine we would see something as wild as we did in the Juventus match. And it's also a little bit crazy to think that Dortmund is going to score 4 goals in yet another Champions League game, especially away in Manchester City. So I do think this is going to be a tough one, one that we'll all probably be pretty happy to come away with a draw. I think that would be a pretty decent result in this situation. And I mean, more than anything else, I think this is going to be a big test of this Niko Kovac defense that we've been praising. Does it hold up against a test like Manchester City, or do we fall apart and come back to Dortmund with our tails between our legs? That could happen too. But I do think that we've got the quality. If we can get a couple of good counterattacks in, maybe even take the lead in the first half, that we could squeeze a draw out of this.
So you're gonna stick with the 2-2?
I'm gonna stick with the 2-2.
I'm gonna have to be a little negative here. I do not believe in a win this game. I believe in a loss. I'm expecting a 2-0 loss. Erling Haaland with one, and then a center back off a corner for them getting that second. The reason for that is I just think that we're gonna sit a little bit too deep and kind of just get caught with our tail between our legs a little bit. Like I just expect a lot of balls to be flying in the box, and Erling Haaland is not a short guy. So I think he'll have a good match against us, unfortunately. But next up, we have a weekend match against Hamburg. They've lost 3 in a row, but they have 2 wins and 2 draws as well. They're fairly mid-table in terms of the underlying numbers. They will be missing Fabio Vieira, who got his second red card already. Paulson's will be on their bench because he hasn't really started for them, but you will know him from the energy drink team. And Pedro's favorite center back is on their team as well, in Luka Vuskovic. So what are our thoughts for this one?
I think in this one would be a more comfortable win for Borussia Dortmund. Supposedly that everyone is fit and we can set up nicely against Hamburg. I don't see we struggling that much, even though I think they have some tricky players that we need to keep an eye on, especially Vieira and Vuskovic, of course, especially on set pieces. That kid, I honestly can't believe that kid is only 18, and I'm also really glad he's a Tottenham Hotspur player for the future. But I think overall, Dortmund, I think, is going to keep most of the possession, even though we are at uh, that home stadium. And at the same time, we need to be aware of Hamburg, because I remember watching the match, or at least the second half against Leipzig away that they had. I think they lost 2-1, but they really pressed Leipzig against the wall. And they really have some really interesting players up front as well. So I think overall, it's going to be tough, but I think Dortmund are going to have the control and will find the right opportunities to score on either on direct play or on set pieces as well. So for me, I think it's going to be a 2-0 win for Borussia Dortmund on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is going to be pretty similar matchup to the game against Augsburg last weekend, with a team that is kind of struggling, really looking to get back to winning ways. I think the biggest difference, however, is going to be that we're at home. And I think that our players are really going to embrace the yellow wall in this match, because we're finishing a stretch of I think 4 consecutive away matches and 6 out of the last 7 away games. So I think that the home crowd is going to make a big difference here. And I do think that, I mean, I generally think I rate Augsburg a bit higher than Hamburg generally, even though Augsburg has been abysmal this season. I do think that Dortmund is going to win this one a bit more comfortably, hopefully with a little bit more of excitement. But I'm going to go a 3-1 win.
Yeah, so this team is performing in terms of points, underlying numbers, everything you would expect. So much better than Augsburg. So much better than some other teams we've battered, but I just think at home, this is going to be a match that Dortmund can have a little bit more success in. I think some of the variance with finishing gets a little bit better, and I just think we match up well for whatever reason. Like, I think the deep crosses into Grassi are something to watch this game, because I just don't love their center backs in that situation, as good as Vuskovic has been going forward and running in, chasing balls in behind. I haven't seen him have to do a lot in terms of balls in the air coming into the box. So we'll see there. He is a big guy. But yeah, I just think overall you're missing one of your creative guys. I think they're gonna end up sitting a little bit deeper, and this is a match that you're looking at Julian Brandt off the bench. You're looking at Serge Guirassy to really look better in than he has recently. We'll see, because I kind of don't believe this. It feels like this team just scores goals out of nothing. Because they don't really create chances. But I'm sorry. I'm regretting my 3-0 prediction. I'll stick with it, but I don't know. Pedro, have you given a score prediction for this one?
Yeah, I gave it 2-0.
2-0, right?
Oh, ignore me. Anyway, Borussia Dortmund will face Bayer Leverkusen in the next round of the DFB Pokal, as Bayern ensure Dortmund get a very difficult draw and get all the good teams out for them. How are we feeling about it?
I think I said in the group, I think I would like a more digestible opponent at this stage of the Pokal, but at the same time, it's good that we're playing at home. Leverkusen is still ups and downs, just trying to figure themselves out since they lost so many players in the past transfer window. And at the same time, I always think it's good that if we have to face those guys early on and we are successful, it's good that we're facing them at home. And if we kick them out, it's one, in theory, top 5 team in the league out of the Pokal. So there's fewer better teams ahead in the competition in their later stages. So in that sense, I think that's positive. I think it's a good test for Borussia Dortmund. And I'm glad we're going to be able to see the boys play a cup game as important as this one in front of the yellow wall. So I'm excited. As I said before, I like entertainment in football. So this is definitely going to be an entertaining match.
I agree with everything that Pedro just said. I think the trickiest part of this cup tie is probably going to be the fact that we play Bayer Leverkusen in Bundesliga away from home, I think 3 days before this match, which that's just one of those things that happens once in a while with the cup. But I sometimes think there can be a bit of an extra tactical or mental shift between the two matches, especially if one team is clearly the victor in that league match. Then what kind of tactical shifts will we see in such a short span of time? Um, hard to say, and that's that'll be a tricky part of this tie for both clubs. But I'm glad it's the second of the two games in a row, and I'm glad that it's home. So I mean, and like Pedro said, it's another top five team that could potentially be knocked out of the competition before the quarterfinals. And if you're going to win the German Cup, you're going to have to beat at least one of the best teams or a couple of the best teams on your way to winning. So, um, yeah, bring it on, Leverkusen. Let's kick their ass.
Our last bit of news is Borussia Dortmund are contemplating adding release clauses to Nico Schlotterbeck and Karim Adeyemi's contract extensions. How are you guys feeling about this? The source is Sky Germany.
I'll start with this one, I suppose, and I think we chatted about this in our group chat earlier this week. But my thoughts of this are, I mean, okay, Adeyemi and Schlotterbeck, two of Dortmund's best players. So the positives for the release clause is that we can make a lot of money on them in a few years if they keep playing as well as they are. However, I'm generally of the belief that if we're or if the club is considering giving Nico Schlotterbeck the captain's armband along with the new contract, then there shouldn't be the consideration of a release clause at all. Because getting the captain's armband should also be a symbol of commitment to the club. And if we want Nico Schlotterbeck to be one of the faces of the club, then I don't see it almost feels like it's counterproductive than putting a release clause on. Adeyemi might be a different circumstance because he's young. I mean, well, they're both young, but he's an attacking player and he has a lot of speed. However, I think with seeing Adeyemi get to wear the armband for a few minutes in the match over the weekend, there is maybe a consideration that perhaps Karim Adeyemi is a player who is maturing now and could be entering a sort of a new contract and a new phase and position in the club as part of like their leadership board or like the locker room leadership committee. And I think that a player like Adeyemi could both benefit and learn from something like that, and then he could be one of this team's leaders in a couple of years. So I mean generally I'm against release clauses for both of these guys. I'd rather stick to the old plan of put the release clause on the 18-year-old who you're already trying to develop and sell in a few years. Adeyemi and Schlotterbeck, they're Dortmund players, and I'd like to see them stay Dortmund players for a long time.
No, I definitely agree with Joey. I don't really think I have much to add because I agree with everything, and I think those are the kind of players you have to build around. Nico Schlotterbeck and Karim Adeyemi, two German players, German national team players, and just having those guys as the spine of your team, I think it really benefits Borussia Dortmund for the long term and for their talent as well. Because I still think they are not to their peak yet. I think they can do so much more, and I think if we want to build this team around any player, any younger players or guys who are still going to reach the peak of their careers, I think those are the guys in the squad right now that we need to invest in. And yeah, I'm definitely against putting some release clause for those guys because that means they don't really see much future or at least fighting for and competing to the highest level here at Borussia Dortmund, which is another debate. But at the same time, if we can, as much as we can, just try to negotiate those salaries and invest in those players, just send a few of the older players out like Nicolas Sola, Sabitzer, who don't have that much of a lower salaries, just try to open up space on the bill for the guys who are actually going to be the core of this team for the future. I'm definitely up for it, and hopefully Dortmund can just put them into the team for the new future.
I view this a little differently. Like, I think a release clause is like thought of in this one way is just like a set price and someone can come and pay it. I think there's some benefits here for Borussia Dortmund that are mutual with the players, and I think that it's a good way for Dortmund to kind of maintain a contract with an established star that we haven't really seen in a little bit of time. And so you can set it up where you're guaranteeing that the release clause isn't necessarily active for 2 to 3 years, and that it's only active for set clubs in a few places, and then you're essentially decreasing the odds that it can ever be activated. And if it is, you're making a positive amount of money, and the player can still say no, because right now you're essentially trying to convince these guys on a vision that the club can compete for a league title in the next 3 years, which is something the club hasn't done for 8, 9, 12, 13, 13 years was the last.
We were one match away just a few years ago. But other than that,
we've had one title charge in like the last 12 years, and you'd have to go like before that to look at the last time we actually lifted the thing. And so to me, this is a big step towards getting a sustainable vision towards competing regularly for titles again. And if you get these guys, especially Karim Adeyemi, on a release clause, like Karim Adeyemi is a player who on the wrong side of the age curve I think would scare a lot of people, but there's always a team that may be willing to spend 80 mil on him at the age of 26, 27. And like, what is he going to look like if are his injuries worse? Like, there's so many what ifs, especially with Karim Adeyemi, in my opinion, and even Nico Schlotterbeck, who's only just back from a serious injury, that I just think like this can end up being mutually beneficial if you're guaranteeing yourself that they play out the full 4 years of their first contract, and the extension can guarantee that with a release clause. Like, you can say, okay, you're signing now, you would have had 1 year left, we're gonna not have the release clause active for 3 years, so you're guaranteeing like 3 years more of Schlotterbeck, which you might not get without a release clause, because you only have him contracted for 1 more year after this one. And that's more the way I view it. I think the captaincy is more about like who can garner the respect of the fans and of the people in the locker room, and I think that's determined mainly by the people in the locker room and what the players say. And I think I've seen enough from Nico Schlotterbeck and Karim Adeyemi to know that they can say the right things both in the locker room from the way players act around them and to the media, because I think as fans we're all very supportive of these guys because they know how to act.
And I think either way, the most important thing here is getting both of these guys on new contracts of some kind.
Yeah, and I also it makes a lot of sense what Eli said. I think depending on the value that put in the release clause, I wouldn't be against it, and especially if we wouldn't allow them to be on 2 years left on their contracts.
And you say,
and then
Bayern,
Dortmund
no.
wouldn't have that much of an upper hand in the negotiation. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying, like, you can also write Bayern are not eligible for this release clause.
Yep.
Saudi Arabian clubs are not eligible for this release clause, because that's what they did with like Rossi or like
Bayern. I prefer to sell to Saudi than
There's
Bayern.
Well, I'm saying
variables.
like you can just cross off you can cross off countries, you can cross off specific clubs, like whatever you'd want it to do. That's all a negotiating thing. I think that if Sebastian Kehl can get these contracts done without a release clause, that's obviously probably the best case scenario for Borussia Dortmund. But I think that do you re-sign Nico Schlotterbeck to a new contract with a release clause, or do you sell him to Liverpool this summer for 100 mil? I'm re-signing him. Like that's what it is. And that may be the option. I don't know 100%, but that's where I'm
we
at.
need more
But
details.
do we have it? Yeah, this is a thing that like we're talking about in theory, but obviously like we can't judge the specific release clause until we know like all the details of it. And even after he signs the contract, it's unlikely that we will.
Yeah.
But is there anything else you guys want to talk about in terms of Borussia Dortmund before we head out? Oh, housekeeping. Julian Duranville did return to professional football this weekend, and he played, I think, about an hour for the second team. But yeah, that's it for the housekeeping. Good to see him back fit. I don't think he did not score. He may have had an assist. I have no idea. Stats at that level are very hard to come by. But yeah, anything else you guys want to talk about in terms of Borussia Dortmund?
No, I'm good. I think we can go straight to the goodbyes.
Yeah,
Okay,
follow
well,
us on socials.
First, we have to shout out the top 5 people in the Dortmund Dispatch Fantasy League, starting off with Supercalifragilistic, 26,000 points, comfortably leading there over Bissek and Bauer. German Plate in 3rd, Pints of Bayer in 4th, and Red Munich in 5th. With my good friend Clea in 6th, so shout out her as well. Yeah, that'll do it for us. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Please rate us 5 stars on Spotify. That's very, very important to us. And that'll do it for us. So have a good one.